can't sleep tonight? Then you're exactly where you need to be. There is nothing wrong with you. Nothing you need to solve. Nothing you need to figure out right now. Tonight is not asking anything of you. This is a quiet place. A gentle moment, a soft pause in the night where your thoughts are allowed to slow without being pushed away. You don't need to listen closely. You don't need to follow every word. Just let the sound of my voice rest beside you, like a small, steady light in the dark. If your mind has been busy replaying conversations, worrying about tomorrow, or circling the same thoughts again and again, you're not alone. So many hearts are awake right now, quietly hoping for rest. Tonight, you don't have to try to sleep. Sleep will come to you when you are ready. For now, simply breathe in and out. Let your shoulders soften. Let your jaw unclench. Let the night hold the weight you've been carrying. The rain had been falling for hours. Not loudly, not with urgency, just a steady, patient sound against the window, as if the night itself was breathing. She lay awake beneath the covers, her eyes open in the dark. The room felt too quiet and too full at the same time. Every time she closed her eyes, her thoughts rose up again, small at first, then crowded. A sentence she wished she had said differently, a moment from earlier in the day that would not let go, a quiet worry about something that hadn't happened yet. She turned onto her side. The rain tapped gently against the glass, and for a moment she focused on that instead. Tap, pause, tap. She tried to count the spaces between the sounds, tried to follow the rhythm, but her mind kept drifting back to itself. She sighed softly, not wanting to wake the night. Sleep was not coming, not yet. And for the first time, instead of fighting it, she let herself admit it. She was awake. She shifted beneath the blanket and slowly sat up. The room remained dark, but her eyes had adjusted enough to make out familiar shapes, the outline of the wardrobe, the soft curve of the chair in the corner, the pale glow of rain light slipping through the curtains. The clock on her bedside table read a time that felt both late and early, one of those hours that didn't quite belong to the night or the morning. She didn't turn on the lamp. She didn't want to disturb the stillness. Instead, she stood and padded quietly across the floor, her feet cool against the wood. Every movement felt slower than usual, as if the rain had stretched time itself. At the window, she gently pulled the curtain aside. Outside, the world looked different. The street was empty. The pavement shimmered, reflecting the soft glow of distant lights. Rain fell in thin silver lines, blurring the edges of everything. It felt like the world had been wrapped in a veil. She rested her forehead against the glass, feeling its coolness. Her breath fogged the surface for a moment, then faded. For a while, she simply stood there, watching. She didn't know how long passed. Time was quieter here. Eventually, something inside her shifted. Not a thought, but a feeling. A gentle restlessness. Not the sharp kind that demanded action, but a soft invitation. She realized she didn't want to lie in bed anymore. She wanted to move. So she reached for the cardigan draped over the back of the chair and slipped it on. Its fabric was soft and familiar, warmed by years of evenings like this. She stepped into the hallway, the rain still whispering behind her. The house felt different at night, less solid, more forgiving. Each step down the stairs creaked faintly, but the sound felt friendly, like an old companion clearing its throat. At the front door, she hesitated. The rain was heavier now, drumming softly against the roof. She placed her hand on the handle. For a moment, she wondered if this was foolish, stepping outside in the middle of the night, wrapped in thoughts and rain. But something in her chest felt lighter at the idea. She opened the door. Cool air brushed her skin immediately, carrying the scent of wet earth and leaves. The rain fell steadily, dotting the stone steps, darkening the ground. She stepped out onto the porch. Above her, the night stretched wide and deep, the sky hidden behind thick clouds. There was no moon visible, only the soft glow of reflected light in the rain. She pulled her cardigan closer and took a breath. The rain felt cleansing. Honest, she walked slowly down the path, her steps careful on the wet ground. Each footfall felt grounding, real. The world around her was quiet, but not empty. Somewhere, water trickled along a gutter. Leaves stirred gently. The rain stitched everything together. As she walked, her thoughts began to thin. They were still there, but they no longer pressed so close. The path led her beyond the familiar streets, toward the edge of town, where the lights grew fewer and the night felt wider. She didn't question how she knew the way. Her feet seemed to remember it. The rain soaked into the earth beneath her, and the smell of damp soil deepened. Her breathing matched her steps. In, out. Eventually, she saw it. A small cottage, tucked among dark trees, its windows glowing softly against the rain. The light was warm, inviting. She slowed, her heart easing at the sight. The cottage looked as though it had been waiting. She stood for a moment at the edge of the clearing, rain falling gently around her, and felt something she hadn't felt all evening. Relief, not the loud kind, the quiet kind that settles in your chest and stays. She took one more step forward, and then another. The rain continued to fall, steady and kind, as she made her way toward the light. She crossed the clearing slowly, as if the air itself might tear if she moved too quickly. Rain fell in a patient curtain around her, and the grass beneath her shoes gave softly, darkened and gentle, like the earth had been waiting to receive every drop. The cottage stood just ahead. It was small, with a pitched roof and a chimney that looked as though it had known many winters. The walls were painted a pale, quiet color, something between cream and soft stone, made deeper now by the damp. Ivy clung to one side, heavy with rainwater, and a little garden path wound toward the front door, as if it had been pressed there by years of careful footsteps. A single lantern hung beside the doorway. Its light was warm and steady, spilling a golden oval onto the wet stones. The rain hit that light and turned into tiny, glimmering threads, as if the night were weaving something delicate right in front of her. She stopped at the gate. It was not much of a gate, just a low wooden one, slightly crooked, with a latch that looked old but loyal. She reached out, and her fingers found the cool metal, slick from rain. The latch lifted easily, as if it had been waiting for her hand. The gate opened with the smallest sound. She stepped through. Immediately, she noticed it. The world felt different inside the boundary of the garden. Not because the rain stopped, it didn't. It continued steadily, tapping leaves, darkening soil, slipping off petals and stones. But the air seemed softer here, quieter, as if the cottage had its own kind of weather, one that moved slowly and held you rather than pushing against you. She followed the path. Each stone was dark with rain, and her steps made faint, careful sounds. A rosemary bush leaned toward the walkway, heavy and fragrant, and when her sleeve brushed it, the scent rose up sharp and clean and comforting. She paused, just for a moment, and let herself breathe it in. The smell reminded her of kitchens, of hands rinsed under warm water, of quiet evenings where nothing was expected. The garden itself was small but alive. A low stone wall cradled the beds, and within them pale flowers nodded under the rain. Their petals shivered each time a drop landed, but they didn't break. They simply moved and returned. There were herbs, too, mint and thyme, and something that smelled like lavender. She couldn't see all the colors in the night, but she could sense them. The way you sense a room is full of warm light, even before you turn your head. A wooden bench sat beneath an old tree, its seat damp and shiny. The tree's branches spread wide like protective arms, and the rain fell through the leaves in slow drips, not hurried at all. She realized she had stopped walking again. Her body was doing that tonight, pausing, listening, letting moments stretch. It felt unfamiliar, and yet it also felt like something she had been missing. She continued toward the door. The closer she came, the more she could see through the window beside it. Not clearly rain blurred the glass, and the light within was soft, but she caught shapes. A table, a chair, the edge of a bookshelf, a sense of warmth, and somewhere deeper, a gentle flicker that suggested firelight. Her hand rose before she fully decided to move it. Her knuckles hovered near the door. She hesitated, not because she felt unwelcome, but because she felt seen, as if the cottage knew why she had come, as if it understood the kind of tired that doesn't show on the outside. She swallowed softly, then knocked. The sound was quiet, almost shy. One knock, then another. The rain filled the pause between them. For a moment, nothing happened, and then so softly she almost thought she imagined it. She heard footsteps inside, slow steps, unhurried, like someone who had all the time in the world. The door opened. Warmth washed over her immediately, like the first breath of a bath, like a blanket lifted and placed gently around her shoulders. A woman stood in the doorway, Not young, not old, timeless, in a way that made it hard to guess. She had kind eyes and hair pulled loosely back, a few strands escaping around her face, as if they had chosen freedom. She wore a simple cardigan, the color of oatmeal, and her hands looked like they knew how to make things bread, tea, comfort. She didn't look surprised. She didn't ask questions. She simply smiled. The kind of smile that doesn't demand anything back. "Come in," she said softly. The voice was calm, like the rain. And somehow, hearing it, the tightness in her chest loosened a little. She stepped forward. Crossing the threshold felt like stepping out of one world and into another. Inside, the air was warm and smelled faintly of tea leaves, honey, and wood smoke. The floorboards were smooth under her feet, and a woven rug sat just inside the door, ready to catch rainwater and footsteps. A coat rack stood nearby, with a few scarves hanging from it, their fabric soft and faded, as if they had been loved often. The woman closed the door behind her, gently, sealing out the cold without sealing out the sound. The rain still spoke through the walls, a quiet percussion that made the cottage feel even safer. "Take your shoes if you like," the woman said, as if offering a kindness rather than a rule. She nodded and slipped her shoes off carefully. Her socks were damp at the edges, but the cottage felt warm enough that it didn't matter. The rug beneath her toes was thick and soft, and she realized how tense her feet had been, how tightly she had been holding herself even in her own home. The woman took a small towel from a hook and offered it to her. "Here," she said. She dried her hands, then her hair, gently, as if she had time to care for herself in a way she had forgotten. "Would you like something warm?" the woman asked. She opened her mouth to answer, but no sound came at first. It was strange how being offered something simple could make her feel so full. Finally, she managed a small nod. "Yes," she whispered. The woman's smile deepened, and she turned toward the kitchen area. It was not a separate room, but a corner of the cottage that felt like its own world. A wooden counter, a kettle already resting on a small stove, mugs hanging from hooks, their shapes mismatched and charming. Everything looked used, but not worn out. Used in the way that means life has happened here. The woman moved quietly, filling the kettle, setting it on to warm. The flame beneath it made a soft sound, and the air began to fill with a gentle promise. She stood near the doorway between the entry and the main room, not sure where to put herself. But the cottage seemed to make space for her without asking. To her left, a sitting area waited. A sofa, cushioned and covered with a blanket that looked even softer than the one at her shoulders. A low table with a small vase of dried flowers. A book left open as though someone had been reading and simply paused. And in the corner, a fireplace, not roaring, but glowing. Embers breathed quietly, orange and gold, like a heart that had been kept alive through the night. The warmth from it reached her skin, and she felt her shoulders drop a fraction, as if they had been waiting for permission. She walked toward it slowly. Each step felt less guarded now. She sat on the edge of the sofa, unsure if she should sink in fully, unsure if she had earned the comfort, but the cushion gave beneath her anyway, welcoming her weight without judgment. The rain tapped the windows. The firelight flickered, and for a moment her busy, restless mind went quiet, simply because it had found something else to listen to. The woman returned with 2 mugs, steam rising in thin curls. She placed one on the table in front of her. The mug was warm to the touch, and she wrapped her hands around it instinctively, letting the heat travel into her palms. The scent was gentle chamomile, perhaps with something floral beneath it. The woman sat in the chair opposite, not too close, not too far. She didn't stare. She didn't ask why. She simply sat, as if her presence itself was a kind of permission. Outside, the rain continued steadily. Inside, the cottage held its quiet, and for the first time in a long while, she felt what it was like to be somewhere that did not want anything from her. She took a slow sip. The warmth slid down her throat, soothing something she hadn't realized was wrong. The woman spoke again, very softly, as if speaking too loudly might disturb the peace. "You don't have to carry it all in your mind," she said. Her eyes prickled unexpectedly, not with sadness, with relief, because those words, they were exactly what she needed, and she hadn't known how to ask. She looked down at the mug in her hands. The steam fogged her vision slightly, and as she sat there, listening to the rain, holding warmth, the cottage seemed to whisper a quiet truth into her bones. "Tonight, you can rest." The fire breathed quietly in the corner, not loudly, not dramatically, just a soft, steady presence. She sat on the sofa with the warm mug resting between her hands, her fingers curved around the gentle heat. The tea tasted mild and comforting, like something meant to be sipped slowly, without thinking. Across from her, the woman had settled into the chair. She did not fill the silence. She did not hurry it along. The rain continued its patient rhythm against the windows, a sound that wrapped itself around the room like a second set of walls. For a while, nothing happened, and somehow that felt like the point. The woman stood eventually, moving without any suddenness. She crossed the room and added a single piece of wood to the fire. It caught slowly, sparks glowing for a moment before settling back into embers. She watched the flames shift. There was something calming about seeing one thing tend gently to another. "Would you like to get a little warmer?" the woman asked softly. She nodded before thinking about it. The woman returned with a thick blanket, heavier than the one in her own home, woven with care, the kind that seemed to carry stories in its threads. She draped it over her shoulders slowly, making sure it rested evenly, as if she were placing something precious back where it belonged. The weight of it surprised her, in a good way. Her body responded immediately, sinking deeper into the sofa. Her breathing slowed without effort, her chest rising and falling in a quieter rhythm. The woman stepped back and regarded her with a gentle nod, as if satisfied. "Good," she said simply. She returned to the small table near the window and lit a candle. The flame flickered once, then steadied. Its light joined the firelight, softening the corners of the room even further. The woman said again, "Tonight," she said, not looking directly at her, but somewhere just beside her. "We don't need to talk about what's heavy." Her shoulders loosened at the words. "We don't need to solve anything," the woman continued. "We're just going to make space." She hadn't realized how much she'd been bracing herself for questions. "Why are you tired? What's keeping you awake? What's wrong?" But none of those came. Instead, the woman reached for a small wooden bowl on the table. Inside were smooth stones, river stones, worn soft by time and water. She placed the bowl between them. "Choose one," she said gently. "Anyone." She leaned forward and looked into the bowl. The stones were different shades of grey and brown, some lighter, some darker, each one shaped slightly differently. She let her fingers hover for a moment before selecting one that fit perfectly into her palm. It was cool and solid, grounding. She held it quietly, feeling its weight. "This doesn't have to mean anything specific," the woman said, "but sometimes it helps to let one thing rest outside of us for a while." She nodded slowly. Her fingers tightened around the stone, and she noticed how instinctively she wanted to name what it represented. The worry, the tiredness, the constant effort. But she didn't say it out loud. She didn't need to. The woman rose again and walked toward the fireplace. She knelt and set a small ceramic dish near the hearth where the warmth could reach it. "Whenever you're ready," she said. She stood, blanket slipping slightly as she moved and crossed the room. Each step felt deliberate, like she was moving through water. She knelt and placed the stone gently into the dish. The sound it made was barely audible. Still, it felt significant. She stayed there for a moment, hands resting on her knees, the warmth of the fire against her skin. The rain outside seemed to grow a little softer, as if the night itself were listening. When she returned to the sofa, something inside her felt lighter, not fixed, not solved, just set down. The woman brought her another mug, this one filled with warm water and a slice of lemon floating gently at the surface. "For later," she said. She wrapped her hands around it, grateful for the continued warmth. The woman then opened a small drawer in the side table and took out a book. Not a journal, not something that looked important, just a book that had been read many times. She opened it and began to read aloud. Her voice was calm and unhurried, the words simple, describing nothing more than a quiet walk through a familiar place. There was no tension in the story, no destination that needed to be reached, just movement, just noticing. As she listened, her thoughts drifted not into worries, but into images. A path, leaves wet with rain, the sound of footsteps slowing. Her eyelids grew heavy. She adjusted the blanket, pulling it closer around her shoulders. The woman's voice continued, steady and even, rising and falling like the rain. At some point, she stopped reading. She closed the book softly and set it aside. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of everything that didn't need to be said. She shifted slightly on the sofa, her body finding a more comfortable position without effort. Her head rested against the cushion, and she felt the warmth of the fire against her cheek. The woman stood once more and dimmed the lamp nearest the door. The room grew darker, the firelight now the main source of glow. "Stay as long as you need," the woman said quietly. She wanted to respond, but the words felt unnecessary. Her body was already answering. The rain outside continued its gentle song. The fire murmured softly, and somewhere between one breath and the next, her thoughts loosened their grip. Not all at once, just enough for rest to begin making its way toward her. Enough for the night to feel kind again. She closed her eyes, and this time they stayed closed. She didn't know how much time had passed. Time felt different now, softer around the edges, less demanding. The fire had burned lower, no longer flickering with bright movement, but glowing steadily, as if it had found its own quiet rhythm. The rain was still there. It had never stopped. It tapped the roof gently, slid down the windows, soaked into the earth outside. Its sound no longer stood apart from anything else. It blended with her breathing, with the warmth around her, with the stillness settling deep in her bones. Her eyes opened slowly, not fully, just enough to take in the room again. The candle by the window had burned low, its flame small and calm. Shadows moved gently along the walls, stretching and shrinking as the fire breathed. The woman was still there. She sat in the chair, her hands folded loosely in her lap, her gaze resting not on her, but on the fire. She looked as though she had not moved in a long time, as though waiting was something she did easily. She felt no urgency to speak. She didn't need reassurance anymore. The cottage itself seemed to do that work for her. She shifted slightly beneath the blanket, adjusting her weight, and felt how heavy and comfortable her body had become. Not the heaviness of exhaustion, but the kind that comes when you no longer need to hold yourself up. The woman noticed the movement. She looked over and smiled, not brightly, not as a greeting, but as a quiet acknowledgement. "You can rest now," she said. The words were simple. They didn't carry instruction. They carried permission. She exhaled, a long breath she hadn't realized she had been holding. Something loosened behind her ribs, something she had been bracing for days, perhaps longer. She sat up slowly, guided more by instinct than thought. The blanket slipped from her shoulders, and she folded it neatly, her hands moving with a care that felt unhurried. She stood, her legs steady, her feet warm against the rug. The woman rose too, not mirroring her, but accompanying her. Together they moved toward the fireplace. The small ceramic dish still rested near the hearth. Inside it lay the stone she had placed there earlier. It looked unchanged, smooth, quiet, but seeing it now, she realized that something about it felt distant, not because it no longer mattered, but because it no longer lived inside her chest. The woman knelt and lifted the dish, cradling it carefully. She held it for a moment, then extended it toward her. "You don't need to take this back tonight," she said softly. The words settled gently, without pressure. She looked at the stone. She thought of the weight she had carried into the night, the endless turning of thoughts, the effort of being composed, of being capable, of being everything for everyone. She shook her head slightly. No, she whispered. The woman nodded. She carried the dish to the door at the back of the cottage, a small wooden door that led outside. When she opened it, the sound of the rain grew clearer, closer. Cool air brushed the room, fresh and clean. They stepped out together onto a small covered porch. The rain fell just beyond the edge of the roof, darkening the ground below. The garden glistened, leaves heavy with water, the earth dark and rich. The woman crouched and gently placed the stone into the soil beneath a low bush, pressing the earth back over it with care. It will stay here, she said. The ground knows what to do with it. She stood and brushed her hands together lightly. The rain continued, unbothered. Something in her chest softened even further. They returned inside, the door closing quietly behind them. The cottage felt dimmer now, wrapped in deeper night. The fire had lowered again, embers glowing like distant stars. The woman gestured toward a narrow hallway. There's a room ready, she said. If you'd like. She followed. The hallway was short, its walls lined with simple frames, pressed leaves, charcoal sketches, small reminders of moments noticed rather than captured. At the end was a door, slightly ajar. Inside, the room was small and peaceful. A bed stood beneath the window, its linens pale and inviting. A lamp rested on the bedside table, already dimmed. A folded blanket lay at the foot of the bed, its texture familiar. The window was cracked open just enough to let the sound of rain enter more fully. It filled the room. The woman stepped aside, giving her space. She moved toward the bed slowly, as if approaching something sacred. She sat, then lay down, her body settling immediately. As though it recognized this place, the mattress supported her without resistance. The pillow cradled her head. The rain wrapped around everything. The woman pulled the blanket up around her, tucking it lightly at her shoulders. Her hands were warm, her movements careful. She leaned in slightly, her voice no more than a breath. You don't have to stay awake to deserve this, she said. She nodded, her eyes already heavy. The woman straightened, moved toward the door, and paused. I'll be here, she said quietly. The night will be here. Then she turned the lamp lower. The room dimmed until only the faintest glow remained, just enough to soften the edges of the dark. The door closed, not completely, leaving a thin line of light in the hallway. She lay still, her breathing deepened. The rain outside grew steadier, a constant, patient presence. It washed over the roof, slid down the window, soaked into the earth that now held what she no longer needed to carry. Her thoughts slowed, not by force, not by effort. They simply drifted, unhooking themselves one by one. The day loosened its grip. Tomorrow stepped back. There was nothing left to plan, nothing left to hold. Her body grew heavier, her limbs warm and relaxed. Each breath carried her further inward, toward a place where words were no longer necessary. The rain continued. The cottage held, and the night, kind and unhurried, gathered her gently into sleep.